In 1963, a group of scientists in a fishing village in southern India carried a piece of American rocket technology to a launch pad. On a bicycle, down a dirt track, past fishing boats, out of a converted church. 22 years later, one of the men who helped build that same space program would be arrested, accused of treason, and thrown in a cell for a crime that never happened. And 60 years after that first bicycle ride, the country that couldn't afford a truck would land a spacecraft on a part of the moon that the United States, Russia, and China had never even attempted to touch. This isn't a story about rockets. It's a story about what happens when a nation has almost nothing and refuses to let that be the end of the story. And somewhere in the middle of it is a betrayal so ugly that even people who grew up idolizing the space program have never heard of it. Stick around. It's coming. Rewind to the early 1960s. India has been an independent country for barely 15 years. It is, by almost every economic measure, one of the poorest nations on Earth. There is no space industry. There is barely an aerospace industry. And yet, a physicist named Vikram Sarabhai has convinced the government of something that sounds, frankly, insane. That this broke, newly born country should be launching rockets into the upper atmosphere. Sarabhai doesn't want a launch site near a city. He wants a very specific stretch of coastline because it sits almost exactly on Earth's magnetic equator. The line where the planet's magnetic field runs flat and parallel to the ground, which happens to make it scientifically perfect for studying the upper atmosphere. That stretch of coastline belongs to a tiny fishing hamlet called Thumba, near Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. There's just one problem. Sitting right in the middle of the land he needs is a 400-year-old Catholic church, founded, according to local history, by St. Francis Xavier himself in 1544. So Sarabhai does something almost nobody expects. He goes and personally asks the bishop for the land. The bishop says yes. Over 800 acres are handed over. 183 fishing families pack up their homes. The church's own prayer hall becomes the first electronics lab in Indian space history. The bishop's residence becomes the design office. Cattle sheds become storage rooms. A community with almost nothing gives up what little land it has for a dream most of them will never see finished. Now picture the actual working conditions, because this is where it gets almost cartoonish. There are no paved roads at the site, no cranes, no trucks. Delicate rocket parts and scientific instruments, some worth more than an average Indian would earn in an entire lifetime, are moved from the assembly building to the launch pad the same way farmers move hay. On bicycles and bullock carts, along sandy beach tracks. Among the young scientists physically pedaling that gear down to the pad is a man named APJ Abdul Kalam. Decades later, he will be President of India. Right now, he is just another exhausted engineer with sand in his shoes. There isn't even a proper canteen. The scientists cycle every single day to the local railway station just to get breakfast and dinner. Lunch, they pack themselves. The one Jeep on site is permanently busy. So if you need to get anywhere, you walk or you cycle. On weekends, with nothing else to do, this future generation of national heroes goes to the beach or catches old Hollywood films at the tiny local theater. On the 21st of November, 1963, at 6:25 in the evening, all of that effort gets loaded onto a rocket bought from NASA. India hasn't built its own yet. It's still learning. It weighs 715 kilograms. It reaches 207 kilometers into the sky before splashing into the Arabian Sea, releasing a glowing cloud of sodium vapor into the evening sky over the village that gave up its church to make this happen. Fast forward 12 years. India launches its first homegrown satellite, Aryabhata, in 1975. Built in a shed near Bangalore, but launched for free on a Soviet rocket because India still can't launch its own payloads. Sarabhai, the man who started all of this, doesn't live to see it fly. Then, in 1981, comes the moment that almost becomes a national joke. Engineers need to move another satellite for testing, but there's a catch. Metal trucks throw off electromagnetic interference that messes with the satellite's antenna. The fix? A wooden bullock cart. Wood doesn't interfere with radio signals. Oxen don't come with an EMC problem. A photographer snaps the picture. It runs in Newsweek magazine in America under the caption, "Collision of Centuries," mocking India for hauling a satellite behind an ox. What nobody printed was the actual reason. That wasn't backwardness. That was one of the smartest engineering calls anyone made that decade. But the world had already decided what story it wanted to tell about India. That pattern, the world laughing first and being wrong later. By now, the same men who once carried rocket parts on bicycles are running the show. And one of them, Abdul Kalam, is about to learn the most important lesson of his life from a single night that very nearly breaks him. The 10th of August, 1979. Kalam is now mission director of India's first satellite launch vehicle, the PSLV-3. A 17-ton, 4-stage rocket, the most ambitious thing India has ever attempted to build entirely on its own. 40 seconds before liftoff, the onboard computer flags a problem and recommends aborting. Kalam and his team overrule it. They trust their own numbers. The first stage fires perfectly. Then, in the second stage, something goes wrong. The rocket begins to spin out of control. Just over 5 minutes after liftoff, it crashes into the Bay of Bengal. At the press conference afterward, everyone expects Kalam, the mission director, to be the one explaining the failure to the nation. Instead, ISRO's chairman, Satish Dhawan, steps in front of him. He tells the press, in front of everyone, that the failure is entirely his own responsibility, not Kalam's, his. And he promises they'll succeed next year. 11 months later, on the 18th of July, 1980, the same rocket, the same team, tries again. This time, it works. India becomes only the 6th country on Earth to independently launch a satellite into orbit. And this time, at the press conference, Dhawan does the exact opposite of what he did the year before. He pushes Kalam to the front and lets him take every ounce of the credit. Kalam would spend the rest of his life telling that story as the single greatest leadership lesson he ever learned. A leader absorbs the failure and hands away the success. He later admitted that surviving that failure was harder for him than handling the eventual win. Because, in his words, success you know how to manage. Failure is the real test. That's the story most people know. Here's the one most people don't. 14 years later, in 1994, another brilliant ISRO scientist, Nambi Narayanan, the man who had championed cryogenic rocket engine technology in India since the 1970s, gets arrested. The charge: espionage. The claim, made by Kerala police, is that he sold secret rocket engine blueprints to Pakistan, funneled through 2 women accused of being foreign agents. He is held for 50 days. He has since described being physically mistreated during interrogation. His career, his reputation, and his family's life are destroyed almost overnight, over a crime that, as it turns out, doesn't exist. In 1996, India's own federal investigators, the CBI, submit their findings. Their conclusion: there is no evidence. None. The entire espionage case was fabricated from nothing. In 1998, India's Supreme Court agrees and shuts the case down for good. But here's the part that should make you angry. Chandrayaan has said publicly that the exact technology he was accused of leaking hadn't even been invented yet at the time of his supposed crime. It took over 20 years, until 2018, for the Supreme Court to finally award him compensation for what it called unnecessary arrest, harassment, and mental cruelty. Kerala's government paid him more 2 years after that. The political fallout was real. It contributed to the resignation of the state's chief minister. And to this day, many people inside India's space community quietly believe the case was designed to do exactly what it did: stall India's cryogenic engine program by nearly a decade. The same institution capable of producing Kalam's redemption story also nearly destroyed an innocent man's life over a lie. And yet, somehow, this space program doesn't stay broken. It keeps building. And less than 2 decades after Narayanan's arrest, India pulls off something that silences almost every critic at once. In November 2013, India launches a spacecraft toward Mars. In September 2014, it enters orbit. On the very first attempt. The United States didn't manage that on its first try. Neither did Russia. Neither did Europe. India just did. The total cost of that mission, around $74 million. For comparison, the movie Gravity, a film about space, cost more to make than India's actual mission to Mars. NASA's sister mission to the Red Planet, which arrived just 2 days earlier, cost 9 times as much. You'd think that would earn universal respect. Instead, weeks later, the New York Times ran an editorial cartoon showing a turbaned farmer leading a cow knocking on the door of an elite space club, where 2 unimpressed Western men sat reading a newspaper about India's Mars mission. The backlash was immediate and global. The paper's editorial page editor issued a public apology, and Mangalyan went on to be named one of Time magazine's best inventions of that year, by the same country whose press had just mocked it. The world laughed first, and was wrong later. Again. That pattern of triumph and heartbreak repeating itself isn't over. In September 2019, India attempts something even harder: a soft landing on the moon. The Vikram lander is descending perfectly, right up until it's just over 2 kilometers from the surface. Then, silence. Contact is lost. It crashes. ISRO's chairman at the time, K. Sivan, breaks down in front of live cameras. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who had flown in to watch the landing in person, walks over and hugs him on national television. The moment goes viral across the country within hours. 4 years later, the same institution tries again. On the 23rd of August 2023, Chandrayaan 3 achieves a successful soft landing. Not just anywhere on the moon, but at the lunar South Pole, a region so treacherous with terrain and permanent shadow that no country on Earth had ever successfully landed there before. India becomes only the fourth nation ever to land on the moon, and the first to do it at the pole. The cost of the entire mission: cheaper than the Bollywood film Adipurush, cheaper than Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. India now marks August 23rd every year as National Space Day. This isn't a program without contradictions, and a good storyteller doesn't hide them. The same agency celebrated for frugal miracles has also been the center of a genuinely messy billion-dollar international legal battle over a canceled satellite spectrum deal, one still working its way through courts today. And before nearly every major launch, its scientists, physicists, and engineers with doctorates in orbital mechanics still travel to ancient temples and have miniature models of their rockets blessed, a tradition that sparks real debate inside a country that is officially secular. But the through line never breaks. From a bicycle on a beach in 1963, to a bullock cart in 1981, to a rocket engineer wrongly branded a traitor, to a Mars mission that shamed a Hollywood budget, to a moon landing at the one place nobody else dared try. This is a program that has never once had the luxury of being the richest, the fastest, or the most advanced. It has only ever had to be the most determined. And it isn't finished. India is now building toward putting its own astronauts into orbit, on its own rocket, as early as 2027, and toward operating its own space station by 2035. All of it still on a budget roughly 1/20th the size of NASA's. So the next time you see a photograph of a farmer riding an ox past a satellite, remember, that wasn't a country falling behind. That was a country that had already decided it wasn't going to wait to be rich before it reached for the sky. But if you think Nambi Narayanan's story ends with an apology and a check, it doesn't. What happened to him, and to the people who framed him, went somewhere far darker and far stranger than what we covered here today. We told that entire story, start to finish, in another video on this channel, and it might be the wildest thing India's space program ever tried to bury. If a rocket scientist getting hugged on live television for crying made you feel something, hit subscribe. This channel exists to find the human stories hiding behind the headlines science coverage always skips.